Apple Intelligence is here, and it's incredible.
Hello, welcome to the All Future Podcast, where we talk about all things happening in the future of tech, like Apple, robots, AI, universal basic income, impending dystopian futures, all kinds of stuff like that. So usually a pretty good time.
Yeah.
And today, guys, it's finally happening. After talking about it on this podcast for months, I guess probably since this podcast started.
Yeah, I think so.
And people are actually getting to use artificial intelligence built into their iPhones, made by Apple, if they are lucky enough to have the beta and sign up for the wait list and it goes through and stuff like that.
Yes.
But still, there are regular humans out there using Apple Intelligence beta. Ryan, what's going on, man?
Well, yes, I just got my iPhone 16.
Woo!
And I go to settings here, and then I go over to Apple Intelligence and Siri. That menu has now changed to Apple Intelligence and Siri. And then I click a button to join the wait list. and that also requires that I am also on the public beta of iOS 18.
Right.
So a lot of requirements there. I don't have it yet, but a lot of people already have this. And they're giving their first initial launch of these features. People are testing it, and then even Tim Cook, as recently as I think like a day or so ago, was on Jimmy Fallon, and he talked about how they're launching in October, their initial Apple Intelligence features. So yes, they still aren't officially here in their full capacity yet, but they're coming very soon, and people are starting to use these things. And essentially, it's a 4 gigabyte install for just the Apple Intelligence portion. I believe that it adds to 18.1. Or maybe is that just 18.1 as a whole would be 4
Probably
gigabytes?
that's the whole update, I would imagine.
Yeah, that seems like a lot for just Apple Intelligence. But Siri will better understand fumbled requests, which already is going to be an improvement, because right now, if you mess up that request, it's going to get confused.
Just this is a good feature, man, right? Like,
Yeah.
like Siri gets so terrible, fumbles requests all the time.
Yeah, then it's a lot of like the summarization tools, stuff having to do with writing and I guess fixing up grammar. Also, the cleanup tool in Photos is supposed to be coming in this. Reduce interruptions for focus and important notifications and stuff like that. But we'll detail some of the writing tools. Essentially, they're not giving you just generative writing tools starting from nothing. There has to be something that you have already written, and it will tweak, improve, and refine what you've written, which seems to be Apple's whole, I guess their MO here is these things help you. They don't just replace all of these things, and you're not just going to be doing a bunch of fake things. It will be summarizing things. And then on the other side, for things that you receive, like emails, it will summarize your emails. And yeah, there was this, it must have been a sponsored special thing, because it was Jimmy Fallon like walking around with Tim Cook. Did you see that?
I did not see it.
Yeah, they were filming it on an iPhone 16, and then they walked to like the Apple store for the launch of the iPhone 16 with Tim Cook showing up there and everything. It was cool to see them discussing, but it was all the things you'd expect. And then he's talking about how he gets a lot of emails every day, being Tim Cook, the CEO of Apple. So the summarization feature is really nice to help him. And those are the main things we're getting from Apple in the beta and then coming in October.
Right. So it's none of, I would say, crazy, flashy AI stuff. I like it, though, as the launch features. One, not letting it just make stuff wholesale from the beginning, like you're saying in the writing app. Those types of things are the things Apple needs so that it doesn't go way off the rails and say something crazy or have hallucinations, right? You kind of have to limit what it's doing. I also think this is a great way to sell, I think, what AI really is at this point in people's daily lives. And that is, here's a thing that can just make your life a little bit easier.
Yeah.
There's people who I guess are kind of on the anti-AI side of the house who are like, why are we making this thing? This is pointless. It's doing nothing. And then they talk about all these downsides to it and all this kind of stuff. And then when it all of a sudden comes out and it's just this, then they're like, oh, see, this thing doesn't even do much. It's supposed to change the world. What's going on here? And it's like, well, no, like the mundane nature of this stuff is what makes it great. Like that's what it really is great at the personal level, is this type of stuff. Just make my life a little easier. Make my life a little easier. And that's what these features are. I think from a marketing perspective, maybe none of these are super flashy. So maybe if I'm on the Apple marketing side, I'm maybe a little worried about that. The kind of photos cleanup feature. That's probably the best visual thing you can show someone. They're like, oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
Because it's hard to get the nuance to, hey, look how it summarized my emails. Like
Mm-hmm.
the average person would be like, what? And in fact, most people don't even use email anymore, man.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So like everyone is just using Slack messaging systems and text and chat programs and stuff like that instead of email for a lot of stuff. So these features are safe, I guess, is the bottom line, is what it seems like to me. It's safe both in terms of it's probably not going to do anything crazy. It's not going to make some kind of PR disaster for Apple, but also maybe is a little safe in that it's also not going to have a wow factor to it.
Yeah, absolutely. There's not much that we're getting initially with the iPhone 16 launch. Actually, we're getting nothing.
Yeah,
With the
zero is
iPhone-
the answer there. Yeah.
iPhone 16 launch, and then it's going to be a bit before we see features that are like, wow, let me show you this thing. Because I don't know, there's not that much of a demo to show your buddy, hey, I wrote this message. Let me have it clean it up for me. It's like, yeah, Grammarly could do that. Lots of services have been able to do that. But once you're like really experiencing it day to day is when I think these things will become impressive and actually useful. But in the meantime, if you want some of these features, you can essentially just change your action button on the iPhone, which is new to me because I'm upgrading from a 16, or I'm upgrading from a 14 to a 16.
You got a lot of extra buttons.
I know. I have 2 buttons.
Yeah.
And one of them is the camera shutter button, which I was showing you. I went Pro Max this time. I was expecting it about here. It's here.
The ergonomics are a little. The ergonomics
So you kind of have to go over the phone like this.
This is a little aside. Do you remember when everyone started making larger phones, and Apple still had a smaller phone? It's probably iPhone 5 maybe era, and they would do commercials where it showed like, oh, the reason we have a smaller phone is that, where's my camera? There it is. So they're like, oh, you can reach everything. You see these bigger phones, you can't reach stuff anymore. And then of course people wanted bigger phones anyway.
Yeah.
But yeah, the ergonomics, especially of the Macs, it's insanely bad. It's insanely bad. Like you can't reach all the buttons. You got to use like the little swipe down features and all this kind of stuff to make it work. So yeah, that's maybe a limiting factor of that button placement on the Mac side.
I'm curious to try the shutter button on the normal 16 because I kind of was expecting to be able to wrap around the phone like this, and I have to reach over it or really uncomfortably wrap. But anyways, I have new buttons, and the action button you could change to GPT at this point, which is definitely something I'm going to do, and it's going to give you kind of a taste of all these features, but within GPT. And if you're not a subscriber of GPT, you can totally still get a lot of those features for free. You're just going to have smaller limits, and I think you don't get some of like the photo generation features. But a lot of what Apple Intelligence will be delivering, you can already get. Just install that GPT button and then change your action button to the shortcut, which will lead you to GPT.
Yep, that's cool. My phone's already set up that way with the shortcut on the desktop to GPT, you know? So I haven't, like, putting it to that physical button, that's kind of a smart move. That's kind of cool.
Yeah, within the GPT app itself, you can add photos and have it do stuff for you. You can have it translate things, which I found that really useful. I was just in Italy, and
Look at this humble bragger over here. When I was in Italy and using my AI to do translations.
Yeah. But sometimes you do the visual thing where you take a picture of a menu and it will translate it on top of it, which is quite nice. But sometimes it was actually nicer to use GPT and then have it give it to me in text format, where it's like a little more understanding. I don't know. It's just translating it, but then kind of explaining things a bit more to me.
Yes. This is the benefit of AI translation versus current kind of translation things, like what's built into iPhones without Apple Intelligence now, right? Is that those basically do literal translations is what it's doing, right? So it loses the nuance and what things actually mean. Where when you do an AI translation, it can get kind of the meaning of things like the idioms and different things in a language that are difficult to translate.
Yeah. For example, I was at a gelato place and there were all the flavors listed.
Nice.
And surprisingly, some of the flavors I was like, what is this?
Right.
I don't even know. And so, yeah, you could do a word for word translation, but still it's like, I don't actually know what that means.
Yeah.
And so then I would just add the question, explain all the flavors to me. And then it adds that and gives you a whole list. Super useful and takes it definitely beyond just the photo where it's slapping direct translations on top.
Especially something like a gelato place. One of the flavors are called whatever, something nice, Mussolini's Revenge or something. I doubt they call something like that in Italy. But if you translated that, you'd be like, what the heck? Like, what does that even mean, right? Like, whatever, these Ben and Jerry style namings on things, like, it's hard to figure out. So, yeah, like, that's the kind of stuff that AI is going to make a lot better. I guess going back to what is on this list and stuff, right? Like, yeah, like all these things are great. It's cool, like using the action button to put GPT in. That's all cool. I'm all on board on all this, right? But the kind of the narrative about this iPhone, in general, not on this podcast, but out there in the world, right? This is boring, this is lame, right? Which is the narrative about every iPhone since the iPhone 10, right?
Yeah.
And then before that, it was probably the iPhone 4 was the last time people were excited, said like, oh, this is cool. Because people have a very superficial understanding of innovation or, how products move forward. They're like, oh, well, it's the same shape, so this is lame, and Apple can't innovate anymore. I'm like, what are you talking, you morons? What are you talking about, right? Like, when I look at these features, right, and I am, like I said in the beginning, this is a lot of like, make your life convenient, right? And that little story you just told, right? That's a great little natural anecdote about these things, right? And I'm like, oh yeah, that's neat. That works out great. Yeah. And then like the average person goes, oh, well, I guess next time I'm getting gelato in Italy, this will be a good feature for me. Why should I spend $1,000 on this phone, right? Like it's going to take so much time for people to start getting this in their daily lives. It reminds me not only of the Apple Watch, which we talked about a lot, and when that first came out, people were like, what? I get these notifications on my phone already. Why do I need it on my wrist? And then when people start using it, they're like, oh, wait, this is making my life a lot better. And then going back even to the beginning of smartphones, I remember when I got my my first iPhone, there were a lot of like almost smartphones out in the market that people really like. Sidekicks, stuff like that. I remember like, he's like, Sony had like a Walkman phone. Like there's a bunch of different things that were smartphone adjacent that were cool. And then people were like, oh, like this is lame. Like, and I remember this exact thing. I showed someone, I was like, look, see, I can read the New York Times on my phone now. And they're like, what the hell? Why would you want to do that? Now people are like, well, now people are like, you get a physical copy of the newspaper? Are you an insane person? Like it's like a whole different thing. And that's why I feel like a lot of this AI stuff is going to be. It's going to take this slow roll, right? Because there is no big watershed flashy thing that people are going to go, oh my God, my life's totally changed now. But over time, they're going to go, oh yeah, I really like this. Oh, this is nice. This is helping my daily life every single day. And that's 100% what's going to happen, I think. So that way, in a year from now, 2 years from now, when we're talking about this, people are going to be like, oh, I can't live without this AI LLM integration because I use it so much.
Yeah, I find it especially useful for things that maybe, I don't know, maybe you don't have too much of a plan for and are pretty flexible. Like I did some trip planning I'd had a free day in Italy, and I'm like, oh, what things should I do in this area? And I'm fine asking GPT that question because it gives me a bunch of suggestions, definitely based on various blog posts and stuff. And I just like, well, sure, pick a few from that list. And it saves me that time of going through these articles with all these ads and all this stuff. And it gives me the recommendation and a quick summary. It was super nice for all that kind of research stuff.
Yeah, GPT while you're traveling is awesome. Awesome. It's incredibly helpful, right? And especially because you can ask all those follow-up questions, right? You're like, hey, where should I eat in this city? And they're like, oh, here's some suggestions. You can go, give me a place that has a good view. And then you're like, give me a place with a full bar or whatever. And these were, obviously you could pull this stuff from Yelp or whatever, but it's all that time it takes in that research, right? And that's what people I think are actually going to start appreciating about LLMs and AI just across the board is that, oh, I don't have to do that anymore. And it seems so mundane, what you just described.
Yeah.
But that is absolutely going to upend industries, right? Like because then like, why do I need to go to Yelp then? Right? Yeah. Doesn't make any sense for me to go that. Like the same way like Yelp destroyed whatever, like looking up the New York Times restaurant review of a place or something, right? Like it's like the next step of it. Oh, like, well, that's going to be gone now, right? So it seems like so normal, right? Even the things we just talked about, like in the beginning of, what you can do in the beta right now, these summary things, all this kind of stuff. Like we're going to destroy industries and change lives with this stuff in the most mundane, slow roll way. Now some people are going to turn around and go like, oh yeah, I never use that anymore. Right? Like it's the end of the yellow pages. It's the end of, I mean, people used to print out MapQuest directions, right? Like it's these technologies like don't often turn on a dime where it's like, oh my God, like this is boom. It's another day. Everything is different now. What actually happens, it's a slow chipping away to turn around and everything's different. And when we talk about what to caution people with these things about, right? That's part of the problem in some ways is that like we're going to destroy things without intending to destroy them with this stuff. And yeah, that's happening.
Yeah, absolutely. And you can already see it in certain ways once you're using GPT and soon Apple Intelligence. You're going to be able to see that in certain ways where it's like, oh, if I just choose to use this instead, that's way better than the alternative used to be or what I'm used to at the moment. Like even just let me Google something. One of the other band members is super on board for GPT, and he was using that all the time. And so there was one time he was Googling, I think we were getting tickets to go see the David, and he was on GPT and I was on Google, and he was way faster than I was at getting to the right place and the right link. And I was still going like, oh, my page is in Italian. Let me try to translate it within Safari. Okay. And he's like, I sent you the link.
Yeah.
You know?
Within it, you can be like, hey, I want to go see the David. What's the best time to go? How do I get tickets? What do you recommend for the best experience? Right. Which is something that would require a lot of research.
Yeah.
Right. And that's, I mean, we're going off the rails on what I'm talking about here, but I do worry about people already are so bad at researching things. Like, remarkably bad. Even when they think they're good at it, they're probably bad at it, right?
Yeah.
And now you don't even need to do that anymore. Like it's just the AI is going to do it for you, and that is in what you just talked about. Oh, that's really great, right? Like that actually helped you out, right? Like that, But when you kind of like start going down the path of it, it's like, oh well, where do you get this stuff? Well, I had to scrape some knowledge to get it, right? So someone had to put that knowledge out there. What's going to happen when no one's putting that knowledge out there? Because there's no longer a financial incentive for them to do that, because no one's going to my travel website to click my travel ads and make it sense for me to make this stuff.
Absolutely. And then everyone's going to have access to that as well without having to do the research. So that, like, for the small example of like, when should I go see this, when is it not busy, everyone's getting that answer now, and then it changes how that works. It's kind of like Google Maps or Waze. Like, you take the shorter route and then everyone's taking that shorter route, and it like actually creates traffic on the alternate route.
Which is like every day in Los Angeles. Like, good luck going over the Hollywood Hills and those little side streets or in rush hour.
Unprotected left turns.
Yeah, it's just a disaster.
Yeah. Absolutely. But either way, this stuff is exciting. I'm excited to see Apple Intelligence coming out in its initial forms. But today, if you're like, oh, I got my new iPhone 16, I want these features, but they're not coming for another month, I would recommend trying GPT, the free stuff. Apple's going to be integrating with GPT, so it should eliminate a step there in the future. But even some of the image generation, you could probably kind of emulate the Genmoji thing that they're doing within GPT. The only difference is you'd have to go like just the extra step that it saves it to your camera roll. It's not going to be built into iMessage like right off the bat. But a lot of this stuff you can kind of already try today. Just change your action button to a GPT, a shortcut, which is what I'm going to do.
Good tip. I'm going to do that when I get home.
So one of the things with AI is that all of these LLMs today, they don't really finish actions for you. So we were talking a lot about research and stuff like that. And it will research for you, but it's going to give you the link to then complete the task. But that future vision of this is that it actually can complete the task for you. You ask it, what time of day should I go? When's the best this and everything? And buy me the cheapest tickets for that thing. And then it proceeds all the way down that and delivers you the tickets without you having to do any of the steps. I think for a lot of people, the initial pitch of that is quite scary and definitely makes sense. But things like the Rabbit R1 were promising that kind of thing, that it can complete all the way, do everything that you need to do. So Multion is a service that somewhat delivers this today, and it's just maybe something you could try if you're interested, or it's just something to be aware of, that there are these tools out there. Today it's kind of slow, but it does a lot of the research in the background and finds the things you need to do. And then you do end up still doing the final completion of the task, but it will get you a lot further down that journey, which I don't know. It's cool just to see all these different tools, and you can connect it with social media, even Amazon and stuff like that. So if you're someone who is out there looking for AI tools to get you to the next step beyond just the research, Multion is something to check out at least.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm waiting for you to try it out and then tell me if I should mess around with it. So.
Yeah. But I'm curious if Apple in the future will get us to that step. I think all the AI features we've seen, it's still like an assistant to your daily life. It's not completing these full tasks.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe a completion of a task would be adding a calendar event
Mm-hmm.
or something like that automatically based on an email you receive. But do you see them getting into that zone where it's actually going to make a purchase for you?
Yeah, sure.
Mm-hmm.
If you tell it to, right? That's absolutely what's going to happen, right?
Yeah.
You're going to be able to go, whatever. You ask Apple Intelligence, hey, I want to make the best pasta ever for dinner tonight, and he goes, okay, cool, yeah, here's this recipe, and you go, oh great, well, put in a DoorDash for all those ingredients, and it goes, okay, cool, it's done. Yeah, absolutely. That's easy stuff. That's easy, right? Like that's not even, that's not some kind of crazy AI. You need to figure that out. That's it made a list. Can it then execute? I mean, that's not overly complex, I guess. I don't want to say easy, but like it's certainly executable with today's technology. And that is, I think, the dream. That's the real dream, right? It's Jarvis and Iron Man, right? It's the computer in Star Trek. Like it's this level of AI where you can just be like, oh yeah, take care of that. And he goes, yep, on it, Mr. Stark, increasing the thrusters or whatever the hell, right? I think these kind of agents and stuff like that and having that ability to go one step further with executable task in AI is absolutely coming to Apple Intelligence. It's coming to iPhone for sure, even more than what we've seen demoed, right? Like that's going to be the next step.
Yeah, and then the next step too is it learning what your preferences are and such. And maybe for DoorDash, for example, there's like a $35 minimum until you get a reduced shipping price or whatever, a delivery fee. And you want to always do that, or you don't care about that, and it learns those things. So it doesn't just make the most expensive possible DoorDash order.
You just get like insane. I mean, that's it. Okay. I say the technology is ready now. The part of the technology to make it execute the order is there right now. You might get some weird, like there's definitely still hallucinations and weird stuff in the system. Not so much with direct things like that, but I could see if you got like a more complex task or something you give it to it, you'd end up with just crazy stuff showing up at your door, maybe.
Yeah, absolutely. But either way, these features for Apple Intelligence people already have them. You can sign up for the wait list if you want them soon, as long as you're part of the public beta and have a 15 Pro or later iPhone. And they will be arriving soon. And then in October is when they're officially arriving to every customer who has Apple Intelligence capabilities. I think that in October, they're going to hold an event for their computers. And the first portion of that event will be a whole detailing of what Apple Intelligence features are being delivered today.
The official launch. Yeah, absolutely.
So very soon we will have Apple Intelligence.